Thank God I found my way back.
It took him a while. Long way back.
I crawled.
We are talking about housing for seniors. So this is from the perspective of somebody who's looking to retire, not young people. But we're starting with our favorites, the option of tiny homes.
Tiny homes. Yeah. Homes that are 200, 300, 500 square feet, not 1,000.
Well, typically a tiny home that's built on a trailer, not tiny homes on a
foundation. Right.
No, but I have been obsessed with tiny homes for probably 6 or 7 years, so I've investigated quite a bit. We're not going to name any particular communities, just general areas and some pros and cons of choosing to live in a tiny home in your later years.
Yeah, and we were infatuated by tiny homes because so many of them that you look at, they look so nice. They're decorated very well, and they're beautiful, and they're affordable for most. And so it gives you an opportunity to get a house that you own or you and the bank own, and a nice place to live in a community.
So I've seen many videos on YouTube of homes in Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama. Texas has quite a few, and some in California. And they are very beautiful. They're usually in beautiful rural areas with lots of trees and scenery.
And there's a community, tiny home owners and wherever your tiny home is. It seems like a very nice, friendly community. There's a lot of upside, but it all depends on how much you investigate. When you start to investigate tiny homes, the facade falls away, and you start to see the reality.
Well, we investigate East Tennessee heavily because I did go to the University of Tennessee. We have family in Tennessee, family in North Carolina. So that was my main focus, was East Tennessee. And there were some, if you just want one little tiny room, very cheap, affordable, maybe 20, 30,000, and lot rent at the time was about 200, but today it's maybe 250, 300.
And that's rental on the lot.
Right, and then in addition to that, water was fixed, which wasn't always conveyed. It's $25 a month. Electric was charged in the one community at a commercial rate because that's what they negotiated. So their electric can be a little high for the size of the home, maybe 50 to 100, which is really high for the tininess of the home, because they may use a split unit that's in the wall.
Yeah, with the heating and air conditioning in one.
Or they may use an air conditioning in the window plus space heaters, which is more expensive than using normal heat. So depending on what you use, if it's just that one room, then there's some bigger ones that go up to maybe, I think the largest ones they just made were up to 500 square feet. And they had as many as 2 to 3 split units. Okay, so the pros of a tiny home.
Right, the pros. It's a small house to clean. That's got to be the biggest pro, is it's a small house to clean. And so that's acceptable to a lot of people. It's a close community, which can be very nice, especially in today's world where people are so split, separated, fragmented, But I would think that if you have a neighbor that's close and you have a difference of opinion, then it could be
good or bad.
It could be horrible, actually, because you're always going to see this person because you live very close in another small, tiny home. So there's also community events and activities in some of these communities, which can be very nice. So, it all really depends on you. You can get into a tiny home fairly inexpensive, less expensive than a regular size home, that you may not need all of that square footage.
Okay, so I was all excited because there's tons and tons of marketing done this. They make it so appealing and attractive. But then I've also seen some videos on the negative sides of it, and I'd say most were the positive side because many are reselling or they're promoting their communities. So they don't want to say negatives, but there's been some people saying some of the negatives of living in a tiny home.
Right, right. And there are some negatives that are somewhat shocking because you don't find these in a larger size home. But you also have to realize that you're paying a lot less for a roof over your head. So you kind of have to weigh it.
Well, maybe less totally, but per square footage, you're typically paying a lot more per square footage. It seems cheaper if you get a tiny home. Between 20 was the cheapest, and that was years ago. So I'd say the ones I see lately are close to 80 to actually up to 250, 250,000. And at that point, I'm like, why?
Yeah,
But some of those were in
yeah.
Canada. I did see several in Canada as well. And people typically put those on their own land, and some in Australia and New Zealand. So 250 in their own land. But then you get your own land, you get into the issues. You've got to get your own water, your own septic tank, and your own electric.
So you can get a tiny home, and either it's built already, or it's a resale, which means it's built already, or you can have one built. But once you get through that, then where is this tiny home going to sit? Do you have land that it can sit on? Are you going to rent space for it to sit on? Is it going to be a permanent location or a temporary location? Those things need to be figured out ahead of time. In one community in Tennessee, you pay a monthly rent for the lot. Okay, so it's not your lot, it's your house once it's paid off, but the lot you pay every month. And there are some amenities that come with that, but basically you're going to continue to pay every month.
Well, what I've seen is the lower the monthly rent, the lower the amenities, the lower the building for social community activities or garbage pickup or those type of things. So if you're saving per month, you're paying in other ways. But I made a list of some of the negatives, which, like I said, I was serious about this, so I did want to hear more about negatives than positives. Okay, one is that these communities typically want to get land cheap. So where would you buy the cheapest land?
Well, it's in the middle of nowhere for the most part. And the middle of nowhere could be in mountains, which, that's beautiful. That's real beautiful. But there's a lot that goes along with being in the mountains. And then if it's in the middle of nowhere in a valley, then there's other issues that come along with that too. So it's usually in a less desirable location.
Well, I wouldn't say maybe less desirable. I mean, it's attractive, it's beautiful. You may have more snakes, poisonous things, and animals. What's less desirable to us as we're aging is accessibility to hospitals and medical care.
Well, and that's what I mean by less desirable. If you're aging and you're driving up to mountains, and there could be snakes, there could be tall trees that have a chance of falling, then you're putting yourself at risk.
And also, if you have a heart attack or stroke, time is the most critical.
Yeah.
So if you're in a rural area, and even if they have a hospital, those tend to be not as good as larger hospitals. And now many are closing because of loss of funding since last summer. So here in Georgia, where we live, most of our rural hospitals, well, I can't say most, but a good number of them are closing. So we know we went on vacation last year to Columbus to see Providence Canyon, which was about an hour from Columbus. And I did look around for hospitals and medical facilities, and there weren't a lot there. And I did think, I mean, we are healthy, but accidents happen at a
blink of an eye.
Blink of an eye. So I've known people. Steve's sister-in-law just had a stroke, and because she was able to get to the hospital instantly, she recovered fully and is doing great. But if you're in a rural area and they don't have a hospital, you have to go an hour, 2 hours to a hospital, you may survive, but may not be the same again.
Well, and that's the whole issue with aging. is that you have to take all these things into consideration. How close the hospital is, and are you out in the middle of nowhere? It is beautiful. Don't get me wrong. It's beautiful. Walk out on your deck, and you hear the birds, and you smell the fresh air, and the flowers. It's all very beautiful and breathtaking.
Talk about medical. There was a woman who I just saw who was selling her brand new tiny home. She didn't say how long she lived in it, but it had to be just a few months because the whole community is brand new and it's not even on a permanent location. Her and her husband are living in Spencer, Tennessee, which I believe is between Nashville and Chattanooga. So it's pretty far out there. She mentioned two things. That one, it is like a haul to the grocery store. And two, that she has medical issues that she didn't say what they were, but she said she's moving back to California for all of her specialist doctors because she said there were no doctors in Tennessee. Now, doctors are hard to come by anywhere today, but a small town in the South in particular
could be tough.
Yeah, so I think she's lived in a home. Well, she didn't even have it all. I mean, she was already packing it up, but it didn't look like it was ever all put together. So she's probably been in there 2, 3, maybe 4 months when she decided. I mean, I don't know. I'm thinking, why didn't you research this before you moved? You're thinking, oh, it's so cheap because homes in California are so expensive.
Sure. And a lot of people have left California. 25%, I believe, is the number that have left California in the last year.
I haven't heard that. That sounds very high. Mm-hmm. Where'd you hear that from?
On Reddit.
On Reddit. I don't know how reliable that is. That's 1 in 4. That seems a little bit inflated to me. But they've left and a lot go back because they realize cheaper places tend to have less services. Right. So we ourselves moved to the South to save money, and you find that you're paying through other means. When you're saving through housing or taxes, you're paying through other means for these services.
Right, and I had recently read a story on Reddit that a guy who moved from New York to Atlanta because he thought it was cheaper turned out to be more expensive in the long run than the house that he had in New York.
Why is that?
I mean, there was a lot of different situations of reasons why, but basically it's that people think that it's just cheaper, rent's cheaper, insurance is cheaper, but actually rent is a lot here in Atlanta, and insurance is a lot in Atlanta because of car accidents and things like that. And so auto insurance is very expensive. And then rents have been going up constantly.
And I think we only have maybe 2 trauma hospitals, Grady and maybe one other one. Right. So if you have serious...
Right. Grady, I think, is the only level 1.
I think... Okay, but I know I read, because I made another video, that there was another trauma one. Maybe it was a level 2, but there was another trauma hospital. But we do have a shortage of healthcare providers.
Right. So tiny homes have become very popular. And so a lot of these are selling quickly, and an owner that has the land today and owns or is putting the tiny homes on the lots could be gone tomorrow, and a private equity firm could take it over. And if they take it over, in some cases what's happened is a lot of the expenses for utilities and that kind of thing have gone up. And so you're stuck. This is your home. This is your investment, and you're stuck.
Well, I was researching several in Florida that were older, built in the 80s. They were more considered, they weren't called tiny homes back then, so they were called like RV parks. But it's the same concept, and it's elderly people who now their rents have pretty much doubled, maybe tripled, because they were sold to private equity, and their houses are so old, you can't move them when they get that old. And so I was actually looking to buy maybe in Florida. That was one of our options. And the houses were so cheap, like $25,000, $40,000. And I saw stories that said that everybody's trying to sell them as these lot rents went up because these people are living on Social Security from years ago. So they just can't afford it. And so the prices plummeted to like maybe $40,000. And they've redone like flooring and stuff. The house may be from the 80s or 90s, but they've redone the floors because I was looking at and wondering why they're so cheap. And that's why, because private equity has bought so many of these tiny home communities. Yeah. Some buy them and then just knock them down to build a store or condos or housing or something, because the land is more valuable than these tiny homes.
Right, than the homes themselves.
Often you'll find older women living in these communities because they made less money than men. And as you age and can do less and less, you become more vulnerable as these companies buy the site and say, you have 30 days to leave, you can't move your home. So your home is pretty much worthless and you don't have money to buy another home.
Yeah, that's horrendous.
You're vulnerable. You're vulnerable to becoming homeless. It's pretty scary.
Yeah, so you really have to research, and I know it's tough as you get older, but before you make a move, I would research, plus I would ask other people, what do you think about this?
Well, I mean, you may consider renting so you're not losing your home, but you may be forced to move in 30 days if you rent one of these homes. That's another option. As opposed to renting an apartment, you may consider renting a tiny home.
Yeah, and visit the tiny home area, talk to the people who live there.
Well, the biggest issue I've seen from various videos, what do you think that would be in a tiny home? What do you think the biggest issue would be?
Well, I would think that mold. From rain water not draining off properly.
Water damage is the biggest issue in tiny homes. I had no idea before I started researching them.
Well, I remember looking at these tiny homes and they didn't have gutters.
They usually don't.
Yeah, and that is an issue, because how do you take the water from the roof to the ground without it draining down the side of the house?
Didn't we have a house that didn't have gutters? A rental house in South Carolina, or maybe our first house. I felt like in the old days, they didn't put gutters on little houses.
I don't know. I don't remember that.
But yes, that's true. No gutters. But another thing is the small space creates a lot of condensation.
Yeah.
Condensation, because the airflow is very reduced. And a lot of people have their beds on the floor in the loft, and a lot of them have said they've gotten moldy. They've gotten moldy, so they've put a wooden platform they built, or some kind of foam mattress, or something underneath the mattress. That would let the air circulate a little more, but I didn't realize that. That's a big issue. And most of these tiny homes have a window in the bathroom because of the mold issues in the bathroom.
Right. Well, I think it's also a code, mostly everywhere, that you have to have a window in the bathroom, or you have to have a certain size fan.
Well, we don't have a window.
In the bathroom.
Okay, because we have the fans. I think they don't put in the fans.
Right. Right.
So the mold in the bathrooms, the bedrooms, and then there's issues where maybe it was poorly built. They've had whole sides or whole tiny homes collapsing or falling apart where they've had to rebuild the whole thing or buy another one, that they've lost their whole tiny home. And I don't know if insurance would cover mold if the whole...
Yeah, I don't know. It depends on your policy.
I would guess most don't. But I've seen so many videos stressing about water as being probably the number one problem with tiny homes is water.
Right. Water is not your friend unless you're drinking it.
I mean, we haven't had a lot of water issues through all of our houses. We had one house in Alabama got a lot of water issues, and then this house had a toilet leak for whatever reason. We had to replace the toilet. But tiny homes, the tinier the home, the more the water. Mold.
Yeah, and you also have to realize it's a tiny home, so air isn't circulating as well. And so unless every day, you have your front door and your back door open and the air is just swooping through it, air doesn't flow very well through a tiny home.
Okay, so this woman in Spencer, Tennessee, who was moving, she pointed out her refrigerator as being large and maybe one pantry cabinet. So she said, so you could stock up, because she pointed out that the grocery store was so far away. I wouldn't have even thought about that. So she said you could stock up, and I'm thinking, not really. That refrigerator is not a jumbo-sized refrigerator in a tiny home. I mean, it's normal. It's a normal refrigerator, but I wouldn't say you can stock up. There's really no place to store all your extra toilet paper and things that you're buying.
True. And so you are limited on space, obviously.
Well, you're already trying to put your clothes somewhere.
Right, and you don't have external storage unless you have a shed that's I wouldn't keep food in a shed, but if it's a watertight shed, you could keep toilet paper and paper towels and napkins and stuff like that. But you don't have a whole lot of storage options.
I've seen a lot of nice communities that have a little side yard and they fence it in, and then they have a carport and a shed attached to the carport, and they seem like really nice areas. But then it keeps adding up the price. They're up to like $200,000 when they get that yard, the fence, the fake grass, and the shed and the carport. They're getting up to $200,000 and then a monthly fee of like usually $850 or something. I think that's getting a little bit costly when you start getting that high.
You start second guessing whether a tiny home is worth it. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there are beautiful tiny homes in beautiful areas that everything goes exactly right, and it's a great place to live, and it's affordable, and you have a great community that you live with, and you're close to everything. Don't get me wrong. There are some of those, but the majority of them are not like that. And that's basically what we have found.
Well, I mean, we have a few health issues. I mean, we're healthy overall, but just our CPAP machines take up a lot of space in our house, and our nightstands, plus the water. You have to have special water for your CPAPs and the CPAP supplies. That's a little bit of space. And then you're thinking, well, if you have a medical emergency where you need oxygen or a hospital bed or a wheelchair or something.
Yeah, and then just also realize that unless there's a bedroom on the bottom level, you're sleeping in a loft.
Well, most of them do, because the ones I've looked at have been for elderly, so they do have that bedroom on the bottom level. But the issue is, to get to that bottom level, they all have steps because they're on a trailer. So they all have steps. You can pay extra to get a ramp put in, which the majority don't. Now, I have found with older people, medical emergencies come up rapidly, and they don't think ahead to get that ramp before you need that ramp.
Right.
They think after you're in the hospital, and they say, oh, they're coming home in a wheelchair, and they have no way to get into their home.
Yeah, that's tough. That's
yeah.
really
So
tough.
I always look at those and think they should just put those in automatically. If they're marketing towards older people, they should just put in a ramp, because so many people have mobility issues. I mean, I've noticed it everywhere we go.
Right.
People are struggling to walk, and it's not even just older people, but I have seen so many young people. I mean, we were at the park, and this lady was pushing a stroller, and she had a kind of an unusual gait, and I could see she was struggling. I don't know what was wrong with her, but her gait was not normal, and I was like, she's only like 30, 35, and she's struggling, and I've seen them in stores, and when we went to Columbus, a guy was looking at his cell phone, tripped on the curb, and I thought, gosh, he was like 40. And then in Georgia, there was this huge story of the teacher who went outside when his students were TPing his house, that's toilet papering his house, and it was a sad, sad, sad story, but he tripped on a curb and ended up dying. But you could look that up yourself. But the fact is, he was 40 and tripped, and I thought, wow, a lot of people are seeming to have more and more mobility issues, and these houses have multiple steps to get to the front door, even though your bedroom's on the main level. And then, you could have guests who have mobility issues and whatnot. I just thought, I don't like that they all have those steps. And sometimes they don't always have handrails. A lot of them don't have handrails.
Right, exactly, yeah. Yeah, and I mean, so there are issues, and, you really have to research. It's dependent on your issues, whether a tiny home is it for you or not. We thought a tiny home was a great place to live, and mainly because of the cost and location. But when you research it, you find out that there are these other issues that preclude you from living successfully in a tiny home.
Well, they've done a great marketing job, and people fall for it and say, oh, it's so nice, we can get rid of all of our stuff.
Right.
But I'm finding, as I watch these videos, so many are reselling instantly within months. And then so many people have health issues, and they have died while living in the tiny home community. I don't know if it was lack of medical care or what it was. But for us, we decided...
It's not going to make it. You know, it's not worthwhile to invest in that tiny home and have to put up with all these other things and, you know, possible flooding and the mold and, you know, everything else. I think, you know, we don't want to move somewhere and get health issues from it because mold can really do some damage to your lungs over time.
And yeah, we didn't mention that some of the communities are built in floodplains because they're allowed to do that because they're on wheels.
Right.
And in theory, they're supposed to be able to pull that out if it floods.
When it floods.
And in reality, these elderly women who don't have trucks are not going to be able to pull their tiny home away from a flood.
Yeah.
So that is another big issue. It's cheap land that nobody wants that's in the middle of nowhere, that they're often build these communities.
Right. And it's, you know, some of it is nice. Some of the lots are nice. The land is nice, you know, but then again, I look at some of these that are in the mountains and I see these pine trees that
Where
are...
Alabama has quite a few.
Yeah.
They have pine trees.
Yeah, in Tennessee, and I see pine trees mixed in with hardwood, and I just think, wow, those pine trees, they come down, they're going to hit that tiny home, and that tiny home is gone.
Well, when we moved into this house 6 years ago, the city that we moved from had a young couple died because the tree fell on them in their bed and killed them both instantly. And yeah, we had friends who had a tree fall in their house, and they had to move out for like 6 or 9 months for them to repair them.
There's a house down the street from us.
That our neighbors.
Tree had fallen.
And they had to move out.
Pine tree had fallen on their house.
And the bedrooms, and they had to move out. And that was the second one that had fallen on that house. And there's still pines around it.
Yeah, and so when we moved into this house, we had all the pine trees taken out that were close, and I'm glad we did. But across the street, they have tons of pine trees, and you can just watch them sway back and forth in the wind and just hope that one day they don't fall this way.
We didn't realize when we looked at the house how many pine trees we had, but once we moved in, they started creaking and moaning. And I said, these pine trees are telling me they need to be removed.
Yeah, they are Georgia pines, so pine trees grow everywhere. And I find myself picking pine trees out of the landscaping. So these little pine trees start growing. And you want to get them before they get too big and pull them out.
So, yeah, I do see a lot of the tiny home communities promote the trees as privacy and being beautiful, offering shade. But I always think that tiny home is not as substantial as a house, which a house is not totally substantial. So that's very dangerous.
Yeah, and you don't think about that. If they're hardwoods, you have more of a success possibility. But if they're pines, the roots aren't very deep, if they're deep at all. And pines can fall pretty easily.
Well, I always, you know, we've had tornadoes supposedly today throughout Georgia, and I always think if we lost our whole house, maybe I'd be willing to move to a tiny home because you have nothing, but there's nothing close to medical and nothing close to our kids, so we'd probably rent an apartment or something. I don't think I'd rebuild a house because houses are hard to take care of as you age, but we're in our house. So we're going to talk about other options. We're going to go into apartments, senior housing, and other things in future videos.
Yep. So stay tuned, subscribe, hit notifications, and
check that description because we have other links in our description.
That's right.
Until we see you again.
Take it easy.